federal government's hopes of getting a tax cut for big business through Parliament this week have been dashed. Talks with the Senate crossbench have been abandoned until Parliament resumes for the May budget. With the government's agenda stalled for now, Labor's policy plans also went a bit wobbly today. It's wound back its own controversial tax plan. In Canberra, here's Tom Eagleton.
What we've done today is made a good policy better.
Bill Shorten either doesn't understand what he's doing or he's lying to the Australian people.
What this pensioner guarantee demonstrates is that Labor is the party for pensioners.
That is just arbitrary policy put together on the run.
Malcolm Turnbull and Scott Morrison have nowhere to hide.
Bill Shorten cannot be trusted with your money. He cannot be trusted with your savings.
Labor's calling it a recalibration, a tweak, anything but a backflip.
I'm not too arrogant to recognise that when we introduce a big policy, that I don't listen to people.
The opposition boasted it was ready for a scare campaign when it announced an end to tax refunds for some shareholders. After congratulating itself on its own bravery, Labor's nerve held for only a fortnight.
What we've done is we've robbed the government of whatever scare campaign they might have had.
They've been running around with their scare campaign trying to scare Australia's pensioners. Well, now they stand exposed as defending this tax concession, which goes overwhelmingly to Australia's wealthiest households.
But the government says Labor's still got everyday Australians in its crosshairs.
This is a man who 2 weeks ago said that it was carefully considered, they were all millionaires. Yes, there were some pensioners, but, you know, he accused me of using pensioners as a human shield, and now he's trying to do a backflip. Well, he hasn't landed on his feet because pensioners will still be caught.
Currently, shareholders get a credit for company tax already paid on profits. Initially, Labor's policy denied tax credit refunds for any shareholder not paying income tax. Now it'll allow 277,000 people currently on a full or part pension to claim the tax credit, plus another 29,000 people on other forms of income support. But new self-managed super funds established from tomorrow onwards, with a pensioner as a beneficiary, wouldn't get the tax refunds. The government says Labor's policy's daylight robbery for those who've worked hard to build a nest egg.
Alan has paid tax all of his life, you muppet! He's paid tax all of his life! Beaker over here! Beaker over here! Sides.
And it says pensioners will still lose out under the changed policy.
Pensioners will be hit if they dare to want to manage their own superannuation funds.
Labor says it's simply closing a potential loophole.
Well, one of the reasons we've got the grandfathering arrangements is that some self-managed superannuation funds, which have a pensioner in them up until today, will continue to receive the benefit. But what we're saying is that we got the advice that there would be a behavioural change if we let that continue forever. And so we didn't want to see that sort of leakage from the revenue.
I imagine a lot of pensioners are saying, well, why didn't they think of us in the first place?
Seniors groups are welcoming the changes but warning the policy still risks undermining the superannuation system.
There will be people now who are just outside of the pension entitlement who will reconsider their affairs and reorganise their affairs, and they'll be going on to a part pension so that they can acquire the benefit.
And he says policy chopping and changing only makes those decisions harder.
It's a policy that has created confusion and it's created concern, and I think it still is creating confusion and concern.
How can people trust Labor when you change your mind inside a fortnight?
We saw an opportunity to make a very good policy even better, to make a good policy even fairer and more progressive, and we took on board the feedback that we got from the community. I think people will welcome that.
Why not spend, though, that fortnight fine-tuning your policy before you announce it?
Oh, look, I think the fundamentals of the original policy are very sound. They're very good. It's a very good policy. We can't afford as a country to continue to spend billions of dollars sending cash refunds to people who haven't paid tax in the first place.
So why did Labor lose its nerve? Yesterday's news poll result gave no hint voters were punishing the opposition for cutting pensioner shareholders out of imputation tax refunds, but hitting them risked damaging Bill Shorten's carefully crafted image as defender of the little guy. It's no coincidence that Labor's also now pledged to repeal the government's planned tax cuts for large companies.
Regardless of what legislation is passed this week, Labor will repeal this corporate tax giveaway of $65 billion to the biggest companies in Australia, the banks and the multinationals.
As it turns out, there won't be any legislation passing this week. Talks with the Senate crossbench have ended in a stalemate.
It's the government's intention to bring the business tax cut legislation back to the Senate in the next sitting week.
The workers up at Sparrows.
Until then, a new campaign from employers will try and convince the crossbench and the public that tax cuts are a good idea. The Business Council's planned a 12-month ad blitz starting after Easter.
When business thrives, the whole country thrives.
Today it was lobbying politicians directly and downplaying a leaked internal survey suggesting less than 20% of its members would use a tax cut to put up wages.
Why won't the Prime Minister admit that his $65 billion of handouts is for the benefit of big business and not for the benefit of workers?
The reality is our company tax cuts will deliver more jobs and better paid jobs, and the cuts we have in place already are part of the reason we are seeing the highest jobs growth in Australian history. The Labor Party wants to campaign on less investment, fewer jobs and lower wages. That would be a disaster for Australian workers.
All that before the Senate's even voted on the latest tax cuts.